LeAnn, and welcome to today's episode of Melody of the Future, a series of conversations about how technology is changing the way we create, share, and experience sound. I'm thrilled to have two incredible guests with us today. Dr. Mark Sheppard, a neuroscientist and lecturer at the University of Kent, whose expertise includes digital signal processing and cutting-edge computing technologies. And Dr. Alec Smith, a composer with a PhD in composition, known for pushing the boundaries of music and exploring new, innovative frontiers in sound. Today, we'll be exploring the fascinating intersection of artificial intelligence and music, and how these advancements are shaping the future of sound. So I'm very happy to talk to you about the application of AI in sound and music production. And I would like to ask you about your thoughts and feelings about AI and how it's impacting the music industry in general. Mark, what can you say about this?
Well, in a sense, when I think of AI and automation, it's actually an automated tools. It's more the thrust of the research seems to be going more in the way of reducting. We're basically creating a reductive feeling around creative. And what I'm finding more and more often is this: instead of using a multimodal model in a way, we're actually using lots of different aspects of creativity to produce art, whether it's music, art, or whatever, or poetry, you name it. And basically, it's reducing it into its lowest parameters, almost like a one-dimensional parameter. And it's almost like the increase in development of AI is actually more geared towards producing something similar to humans, but less than, and trying to replace creativity. And that, for me, that is a major red flag in that sense.
Replace creativity, but can't you see like this as an extension of the creativity, as a
that's a good point. 'Cause in my work as well, I'm looking at creating tools which actually working with the creator to produce as a mentor to enhance creativity or push the creator into different avenues of creativity. So it's more of a tool, but also making the person, the human, more productive rather than less productive. So there's two kind of threads in the way AI is going at the moment. The developer thread, where the developer is trying to aim to produce something which replaces people and replaces creativity and music, and it becomes this kind of homogenization, which is really just very bland and very, very generic. And there's the other thrust in terms of where creative people are trying to use AI tools to enhance their creativity. And that's a more challenging proposition, because the creative thought needed to actually define creativity. Nobody actually knows what creativity is. People know when they know it because they can feel it, but it's not definable. And this is the reason which upsets data scientists and computer scientists and developers, because they work in reductive terms. So as long as something looks like or sounds like the thing they're trying to mimic, that's good enough. But for a creative obviously will sense and know that it's not really ticking the boxes. And I think that this is where we are in the moment in this frothy world of AI in development. There's two camps essentially.
What do you think about this, Alec?
To be honest with you, I think it's mostly sort of mirroring what Mark said there. There's a lot of difficulty around this because, of course, there's certain automations in creativity that are very handy, not repeating, ridiculous tasks over and over and over again to get to the same result, which, it absolutely makes sense then. That's what it's for. It's supposed to be like anything else, using a computer instead of a typewriter, instead of writing by hand, etc. It just makes absolute sense. But when it comes to, I don't have any need or desire to actually do something unique and special with my creative kind of powers as a human being, whatever that might mean, then it does become this ridiculous thing where it's just listening to this very generic or reading or hearing or seeing or whatever it might be, this very sort of middle of the road kind of outputs. And for me, that's not a very useful thing. So all of this
Okay.
generative music, as much as, I mean, it's very cool. The fact that we live in a time where this is possible, I think that in itself is amazing. That we as humans have achieved this, where we can make something. That's pretty cool. But I think the question is, okay, now that that's happened, where do we go with this? Because it doesn't really stand up on its own, I think. And
Totally
even
agree.
this is all over. Like for example, I think it was this morning I saw on Fantano on his channel that there was a thing about basically how AI is like terrible, for the music industry and all of this kind of stuff. And I think this argument is really, as Mark said, it's split into sort of two parts. There's like a usefulness part where it can be really good and really helpful, and it's actually a great thing. And then there's this sort of very lazy, almost very corporate way of approaching it, which is, kind of, we need music, we can make something that makes music, and therefore let's just do that and not pay someone to do it because it's faster and we can get some generic stuff that, it's fine for an advert, which is pretty awful in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Totally. And also,
But
when you put it on that, I was going to say one other thing which has sparked me off. Sorry for putting it in, but when we've got training models for music and it's been trained to a certain extent to use music, but they then basically get a country song which sounds like a country song. You get various different genres, but it's all very similar, all very homogenous. And so adding in that extra injection of creativity is more difficult, because also the problem ethically as well is that they AI companies, the bigger ones, Meta, look at OpenAI, etc., is that they're looking to scrape music. And I saw a recent email I had this morning from AWL label, and they just said, be careful, because X is now is scraping music from X. So if you put any music on X, is posting from your as an artist, they're going to use that. You're going to use that music for training purposes. So that's really scary, because they're then taking copyright material through a back door by saying, because you agreed to let it be scraped, it's fine, but it's copyright material. And so they're open to produce other tools on this music to, again, emulate an artist. And as you know, when people try and write a hit song, they know when they've written a hit song. I know when there's the old adage of Ian Duran the Blockheads, when they produced Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick. When they wrote that track, they said that's a hit. They don't know why, but it went to number one. But if you try and create another number one hit, you can't do it. You can't write in the same way. Lightning does not strike twice. So the very approach and nature of AI companies thinking that they can write hit after hit after hit and it's going to land every time is just insane.
for sure.
There is
But
one thing about this that's kind of interesting, though, because you could argue to some extent that this is no different than any of us going and learning, countless amounts of different musics from different genres, different people, different eras, whether it's classical or whether you learn on your own or whatever it might be. The point is that you are doing that yourself, right? You are actually going and listening to X guitar player or X piano player or composer or whatever, and sort of picking parts of that you like, that appeal to you aesthetically in some way, and then being able to use those things to build your style on, which you could sort of argue is what AI basically does. I think it's just more direct than how a human can do it. Because I know it sounds sort of insane, but if you imagine that there was like only 3 recordings that had ever been made ever, and you have like, I know, something that was like Jimi Hendrix live, in the middle of the 60s, and I don't know, New Order or something in the 80s, and let's say Oasis, because they're my favorite band. Not. But from the 90s, and you take those 3 recordings that have only ever existed in this way, and that's all you can learn music from, and you have to learn music through those things. You're going to copy those things to a certain extent, because that's naturally what you think music should be, because you have no other reference points. So I don't know if there's some kind of an argument in there where you could almost say for AI that the training data needs to be broadened a lot, actually, to make it more fair, rather than saying we're not going to give you training data by copyrights, if you see what I mean.
Which is a fair point, but I think that's the problem is with copyrights, again, royalties, etc. That all those will suffer. Basically, if you're writing a similar song to Live Forever, for example, by your favorite band, is that then you're gonna basically, then you may still listen to the original, but may listen to but then the new version may not hold up either. So that's the other big question. But I think the other thing is that also when you're thinking about if you're in a three piece of music, is that you could take this piece of music and then you could then filter it through you and get something totally different out of it as well. So, for example, there was a band I saw, I think it was in the early 2000s, Yak, which was, I think, a Mongolian throat singing band who played a really heavy kind of Santana kind of things and Black Sabbath stuff. And you got this Tuvan throat singing over a massive guitar riffs and things like that, also with Chinese music in there as well, which is interesting because they then took that and made it into something different. Obviously, it kept true to the originals to a certain extent, but added this different flavor to it. And also then when they wrote their own stuff, it was actually an amalgam of that, which actually was quite an interesting mix, and took it further and expanded it further. So they went a bit proggy, a bit kind of heavy metal, and more Chinese traditional music angle. So those things were up to a point. So you got a certain amount of stretchability in the style before style becomes something else. So before you start adding other elements of styles. But I think the thing with AI, because it's not trained on dynamics in terms of what the dynamic is in the moment is. So if you're playing a guitar, for example, you might hit a certain note in a certain way, and it just hits that point. It's like B.B. King's vibrato note, when it just hits one note. And when it's in the right place, you think, wow, that's fantastic. When it's in slightly the wrong place, you go, it's okay, but I didn't really quite like that. And so there's this element in timing, but also elements in dynamics. And then that emotive sense, it's like when they talk about the blues as well, I always find. And people say, yes, it's an easy song format to learn. It's an easy genre. It's based on pentatonic scales, 5-note scales. You play it in certain waves over 1, 4, 5 progression. So going, basically G, C, D, etc., and going back down again. But when you play it over a lifetime, then you bring in more emotion and intuition into your notes as well, and basically you're adding texture to the notes over time. I don't think AI can. If AI was doing that and then making something sound more authentic, I think there would still be something which you knew wasn't right, basically, about the whole thing, because your brain works in very rapid ways to identify, yes, this is real, this is not real, especially with audio.
Yeah,
that's gone.
I was going to say, I think this is a really interesting point, because also, I mean, there's sort of two sides of it really, because you have like the kind of the theory side of what you can and can't do in terms of, as you say, like certain progressions for certain styles or whatever it might be. But, generally speaking, most of the music we listen to is based on 12-note scales or some, parts of those 12-note scales. It's all in equal temperament. It's, it's actually quite locked in. Obviously, as you go further afield than Europe and America, it can become a lot more, interesting. But I think the thing is with AI, it's basically training it about like inflection, I guess is the word you would use for it, right?
Yeah.
Like this kind of adding the special sauce, the paprika to the, to the thing. And I do wonder if there is some way of quantifying that, because I know it sounds probably crazy to even think about that, but maybe there is a way where if you had a large enough data set, which ironically you could use AI to analyze, where you could look at all these great people, Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Hendrix and B.B. King, like you mentioned, and you just put them all together and you say, okay, this is the the way that they bend notes or the way that they do vibrato in a certain context, and be able to have those data points. I'm going to sort of almost assume that there will be some correlation. It may be that the correlation is actually just like localized to the person, but I think there is potential there to train an AI to do that. I just think we're nowhere near that point yet. And,
No.
It's interesting, this idea of what you're saying about how, like, could you recognize whether it's a person or not? And I think that's really where it gets a bit dangerous.
Because it gets in that reductive sense where you're now replacing the musician, that's really dangerous. And then are you making it any better? Because then the whole point of, again, I always find with music and learning an instrument is about the journey. It's about your personal journey. And say, for example, with guitar for me, it's just basically, I've been playing for 42 years. I think I'm getting better. That's the whole point of music, because it's a challenge. It's a journey. Keep going and keep trying to, produce something which you feel, but it's a constant battle. But also the playing the guitar itself enriches you. It's a focus. I mean, I always think, I'm not particularly religious, but music is like, when my guitar playing is like my church in a way. You go, you turn the amp on, and then you hit it, and then you're there in the zone. And completely like the neuroscience type aspect, when you get into that flow state, that delta wave state, and the theta wave state, where you've got that emotive flow as well. This is why you play music, because the brain is hardwired for music. There's one big paper I'm interested in from, I think it might be 2012 or 2014, I was getting it wrong, but it's a guy, Aluri, in Finland. It did functional MRI by scanning the brain, listening to music, and these really small component parts of the brain which actually responding to timbre, rhythm, melody, complexity, loads of things, and all happening in orchestra as you're listening to a piece of music. After that first 50 milliseconds, when you hear a piece of music, when you're hearing that and then processing it 250 milliseconds later, it's basically being processed all over the brain. We're typically hardwired for music. So if you're creating an AI with that sense of producing music, what's the reason, apart from trying to destroy the musicianship and that human emotive connection with an instrument and with people in a band or an orchestra, by saying we don't need any of that anymore, we're just going to have this thing playing music now, and that's going to be your focus. For me, that sounds dystopian. It sounds very Huxley kind of influenced.
I think there is some context for it, because I could say that if you're thinking about, as you say, kind of a context of going to listen, right? Like the thing that you want to go see, the orchestra, the band, the whatever it might be. I can't think of other examples. Theatre maybe, where it could be live, this kind of thing, where you want that connection with the people. You need to have that. But then you could say, when it comes to an advert, for example, where, a lot of advert music, or to use the more sort of classic example of Muzak for like elevator music, this kind of thing.
Again, the Eno territory here, aren't we?
Right, exactly. And it's like, is it really necessary to have someone with all of Brian Eno's skills to write a piece for an elevator? I mean, maybe it is. Maybe that's what we're all missing. But I think when it comes to those kinds of things where it's not really music anymore, it's like this sound to fill space kind of thing. It's like, is it necessary to have that made by a human anymore?
It's a good point, because I think even with that, because also when I look at adverts, I rarely remember any adverts now. So even if you've got music on, I just think it's a noise. I just blah blah blah. It might be something. It might be a car going past, but the car doesn't mean having a car doesn't mean it's necessarily selling cars. It could be anything. It could be Smirnoff or whatever it would be. So for me, it's almost like a switch off. As soon as I hear this kind of music, I'm gone. Whereas if you had music where you had, I don't know, some a Beatles track in there, or had some Led Zeppelin or something, you immediately, it's an Immigrant Song, for example, I'm not going to do it now because it'd be too loud. But having that in an advert, you think, wow, it's like, oh my God, it's the Immigrant Song. This is fantastic. What they're selling, and that's the difference. I think maybe the marketing aspect of AI scraping and data training is to try and get that excitement back in marketing. I think it's almost like you created a wonderful tool for expression, and also think of how it can be used for cleaning up audio and helping you kind of create a track, and they're using it to sell toasters. I mean, to me, it sounds like, why? All that effort, you're right, thinking to do that.
It's like utopian sort of capitalism, isn't it? It's a bit, selling more sort of bad stuff, or not bad stuff, but just generic nothingness through generic nothingness. It's
And if I can introduce something, because I have some experience in music consultancy and about finding the proper music for commercials. Now it looks like mostly the producers of these commercials, they're looking for some well-known song, this basically the very popular song, to buy the copyrights for the use to use the music and change the lyrics to fit the commercial what they want to sell and to match it to the product, and using these well-known songs that most people like. It's also some kind of a, I know, like psychological trick, right?
But there's a thing though. This is where the AI gets to be really bad, because what you can do is train. Like I mentioned New Order before, right? So take Blue Monday just as an example of something that's kind of very well known. And you could train an AI on that and, other stuff that's sort of in that ballpark, and then ask it to make, I mean, that, maybe is not the best example, but ask it to make something that's like this, that sounds enough like this, but isn't this. So you skirt the copyright issue, you skirt the idea of paying anyone. There's no fees for royalties or any of this kind of stuff at all, but you still get what you need to sell something because people kind of recognize, it's that-ish. And I think this is going to be a big trend that's going to come up.
It's really devious though, isn't it? It's really devious. Yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And at what point do you say it's theft? That's the thing. That's why I find difficult with this is that if you do a straight, clear copyright breach because you're taking the track, and when you're trying to create something close to, I mean, I've seen a lot of stuff in copyright law as well, and some copyright law. It's like with Robin Thicke, Blurred Lines as well. Obviously, he was influenced by a track. When you listen to his influence, it didn't sound anything like the track. So that, to me, it was almost like it was a very biased kind of court case. Whereas other tracks, for example, there's I think, was it Tarkus, and there was the song they did, and it was actually a dead ringer for Stairway to Heaven. And when you compare Led Zeppelin's version a couple of years later, the formats are similar. The way it actually goes is similar, and also even some of the initial kind of acoustic guitar parts at the beginning are similar as well. And that didn't get flagged up at all. So the copyright law has been a bit fluffy in a lot of ways, I think, over time. But I think this will force the issue so much more, because also when you look at analyzing music in forensically, because I do a lot of that stuff as well, especially with voice and also with audio, you can start seeing artifacts in the sound and the production of sound from AI. In that sense, there's going to be AI introduced artifacts. And of course, with synthesizers and in terms of how far the plug-in synths have come since the early days of analog synths is massive. So with those, you get some really fantastic sounds. But I think with AI, if you're trying to train something on a model, it's still going to be very kind of Frankenstein's monster initially, I think. And also, there's a point where some lawyer's going to prick up his ears and think, hang on, that sounds too close to Blue Monday, and they're going to raise a lawsuit. Yeah. So I think.
But then again, I think there is a comeback to that makes it kind of a bit of a difficult argument to have with any sort of stealing. Let's say is you can always, of course, go sort of historically backward and always find something that has the same chord progression as
always
something more recent, because there are only so many chords that you have in a 12 tone.
Isn't it 4 for a hit song? Isn't it 4 chords? Isn't it the C, A minor?
All of the potential that's there. So it's very easy to start sort of going, I've written my song and it goes G D G D G D, and it's like, well, that's not stolen.
That's one of mine. How dare you?
Right, exactly. I think you could sort of say that if you start putting together like these sort of, you've got your chords, and then you can put a melody on top, and then you can add lyrics to that, you can put arrangement to that, you can put recording, and you can sort of cross-reference the whole thing. So you get this sort of very three-dimensional object that is the song at the end. Then that makes sense that you've, stolen it by sampling it, for example.
Yeah.
But when it's just down to, the melody happens to be similar, it's like, well, it depends. I'm not necessarily buying that.
But it's like with the Prodigy as well. I think I think was it with the Fat of Land album. I think they stole so many samples, and also they stole samples from samples of samples of samples, and then basically nobody ever clicked basically. And somebody added it. I saw a YouTube video a little while back, and somebody actually looked at how many samples Prodigy had stolen to make all the tracks. It was off the scale, basically. So it became like a collage,
But then again, do you think that there's necessarily such a big deal with sampling stuff if you're changing the samples to some great degree?
No, I don't. I think also it depends on. Again, it's that length of sample, that argument there. If it's 30 seconds, it becomes almost like half a track. If it's like a 2 second sample of like look at John Bonham's drum beat set over on Moby Dick, that's been sampled so much, and also Gary Newman's synth lines for influencing hip hop, those kind of things. It's like they were the embodiment of hip hop, but basically Gary Newman, you think it was unlikely, progenitor of hip hop, but that's what they took, because it's just like small samples, it's great kind of drum sounds, great synth sounds, and they mashed them up. And that was a really interesting kind of development, and hip hop. That's what I liked about early hip hop. I'm not quite so keen on it now, because now it's going to become looped, and it's become very generic, and everything. It's almost like hip hop now is written by AI. It's become so bland. I mean, a lot of pop stuff now is actually so similar kind of thing as well. So that's the problem where we are with it. But I think chopping stuff and using it as a creative tool, that would be really interesting to you. So if you were sampling. If you could sample all of Led Zeppelin and so get little samples and start snipping together and saying, "Oh, I could put this sound with this sound, and etc." and then create something interesting, that might be something unusual. But I think if you were then learning that, if you were then putting that with real musicians, I think that would be really cool. That'd be even more dynamic. I think that would be the way to go.
Like if you just take that sort of that concept of like, imagine that you took every single Led Zepp recording that there's ever been. You take every single John Bonham kick drum that there's ever been on record, right? And you get every however many thousand there would be, and you take them all, you cut them out one by one, and you put them into, I don't know, Logic or whatever, and then you start sampling them. It would sort of not be okay because it's a person sampling, but to get an AI to do it, it's still the same, the same argument there.
But like, and I think that's where it falls apart. I think
it does, and there's one really really cool thing that I think is getting missed out on at this juncture with all of this stuff, and it's that this is a brand new thing. This has never existed before. It's the equivalent of like someone coming up with a fuzz pedal, or someone going, "Oh look, I've just invented a synthesizer and it does this," or MIDI or whatever it might be. And we now have AI. You can do crazy things, and it has all of these disgusting, awful glitches that it comes with that are brilliant. And it is its own aesthetic. And it doesn't seem that there's too many people focusing on that so much as the the kind of copyright side of it, which is a shame. Because that is a problem. But then we're talking about generative AI versus creative tools, which they are sort of different things.
And that's the big thing. Back to the original point of the conversation, the development aspect, scraping stuff to replace things and get easy money in terms of the marketing kind of schema, etc. And then you've got the creatives, and the creatives, because it's so much more difficult to produce creative tools that make sense, that actually align with people's creative process. This is the problem in terms of trying to get something usable. So obviously in the arms race is that the reductive copy everything and produce something bland is faster than the creative race, because this creative race is taking so much more energy to get something usable. And I think this is, but as soon as if you could create a piece on all Led Zeppelin albums and create something, a melange of something or some interesting accident of things, and then basically put that on the score and learn that as a band, that'd be really quite cool, So that's a creative kind of process. Might be almost like the David Bowie cut and paste techniques, where he's just cut and pasting different lyrics and putting them in order from different newspapers to create new lyric sets. So that would be the kind of angle I would use.
But also, on the other hand, for people who are not, let's say, musicians, and they use these generative AI tools like Udio, Suno, they think that they are creative only through prompting.
Yeah. And it's
How
a
to deal
grey
with
area, isn't it? That one. It's a grey area because I think
Yeah.
it's like I remember I've had even demos sent to me saying, "Listen to my new music," and it's just GarageBand loops. That's all it is. I'm thinking, well, is that actually it's obviously music, but it's not. You've not created any point of that. Also, and also even as a synthesizer player, is that of course you're playing sounds. It's still a keyboard. You still have to play stuff in. Even if you're playing an arpeggio, you're still playing something in. You're still triggering stuff. You're still you're actually playing something in. So I think those arguments are saying, oh, synthesizer is the same as loops and just basically just putting things together or prompting. No, I don't think it is. I mean, on one other thing of this is where you think about making music. If you're disabled, for example, you want to make music, that'd be a great tool for that, because obviously if you're obviously paralyzed, etc., then you can make music through these tools, which is great for that. But the proportion or percentage of people that are paralyzed and are musicians and are really good at it are probably going to be very minimal. It's going to be less than 0.0001%, whatever, from that point. But also, I think the other thing is when you have tools to generate music, write hit song using the prompts. I think that, in a sense, almost like you can actually think. In one way, I'm not trying to put it's like smug musician hat on and say yes, we just we're not in, this is an affront to learning instrument or learning the creative craft. So you can see it's got a place for it, especially as a creative tool, but I don't think it should replace talents, or learning something. Because I know that there's been a big shift, say, from the 80s in learning guitar. Then it went into DJ mixing and this kind of stuff and mixing apps. So people just mixing the mixing kind of things and everything, and they're calling that's creative. And the jury's still out on me on that one. I could offend thousands of people by saying I don't. There's a skill. There's admittedly a skill in mixing, in the kind of being a DJ, but I don't think it's the same as, say, Yehudi Menuhin playing violin. I don't think it's the same skill. They're two different hats in terms of creating music. So the DJ thing has a moment when you're actually in a club and you're dancing, etc., and that kind of excitement of creating a mix. Great, that's all good stuff. But then even on that scale, not everyone's going to be that either. So people making music using generative prompt tools aren't going to be even that. So the DJ's got skill in creating a show and creating a mood and a vibe that you want to dance to. But this sat in your bedroom, it's almost like the ultimate iteration of sat in your bedroom doing the minimal amount of work and thinking I'm going to get rich making a hit song. And that sounds quite harsh in that respect. I mean, even when I said that, I thought, wow, that's harsh, But it's almost... but then, is anybody going to listen to these songs they create? That's the problem, because I think now with music, in terms of we've got streaming services, there's so many digital outlets. You can get music. There's lots of music. You can get hundreds of thousands of tracks. Not everything, of course, because a lot of things aren't on there. But it's a wash with music. And I'm thinking, are you going to? At the best of times, even artists putting music out is difficult to get plays and difficult to get found, etc. That's why it takes a lot longer to get heard and hits and and plays on Spotify, whatever it would be. So even if they made a song, would it get heard? And so would it ultimately matter? That's the other big question. That's a philosophical question I want to touch on there.
Yeah. What do you think, Gareth?
I mean, it depends. It depends, because I think with all of this stuff now, it's like, because we're in this let's say transitionary moment from basically sort of like early 2000s to what will be the future of music, however that's going to be. And I want to just be really clear that I don't want to prophesize, because you never know how this will evolve, right? Like, this could really go in about 25 different directions right now. And yeah, but I think for me, it's a good way of engaging people, because I think when you go to learn an instrument, it can be really scary. I have this experience with quite a few different things now, where or software, that can also be a real problem. And I think when you imagine that you're going to go and play guitar for the first time, and someone hands you an acoustic guitar, and it's like, okay, you get what it is, right? You hit here with this, and this thing does this it changes the sound somehow, and it's got strings, and you don't hold it behind your head. You know how it looks because you've seen it a lot.
Yeah. But, unless you're Hendrix,
Yeah, well, I mean, of course you can. But when you start to expand that out and you think of, okay, so you give someone a clarinet and that all of a sudden has got these funny keys on the front and all these little metal bits all over it, and you have to breathe down it in a certain way to get it to work. And it's like, oh, okay, so it's doable, but it's a bit weirder, right? And then you keep extrapolating out and you say, okay, so I've just put you in front of a synthesizer, especially a modular synth, and learning how to make that actually do its thing is not the same as playing, a G chord on a guitar. But if the ambition is there to want to make synthesizer music, but there isn't the ambition to want to learn how to use the synthesizers, then I can see where there would be benefits of AI. Or thinking out loud as a kind of a way of iterating your ideas. If you're interested in like composing for the first time or early on, let's say, where you're not confident with coming up with stuff just as you do, then maybe it's a great thing where you could say, I want a pop melody, or whatever. Obviously you can make a nicer prompt than that, but you could get 25 different iterations of what you want to hear and learn from it. I think there is a benefit to it. I just think there's also a real problem for, as you say, like this kind of losing the craft somehow, of this learning, this going through the learning, going through the bleeding fingers and the 10,000
tears.
hours of,
yeah
and playing on like crappy instruments that you start out with, and then you get something nicer, and then you get something nicer as you get older, and so on and so on. And it I think all of that has its place for sure. And there is a certain kind of I think there's a nostalgia to it as well, that you miss out when you just use AI. But
and also there's a heritage, isn't it? There's a heritage kind of thing to it where you kind of feel it's carrying on the tradition. It's passing the torch from one musician to the next, isn't it? I think when you get the great ones, then it really shows when they kind of really flew. And I know we get back to the argument with the kind of iterative instrument or the AI instrument. And there's one tool from a guy, Phil Spicer, I think his name is. He's called Instrument 2 he's created, which is basically doing things in different styles, as far as I can tell. And you press a key, and you get an entire song being generated from that moment. And she can do sliders, and you can then change the type of the song, etc. And I think it'd be interesting to play around with it. But I think for me, I get the feeling I get a bit bored of it early on. I think I can just say, if you're churning stuff out where there's, it's like when you find a new chord, for example, you think, oh, what's this? You always keep finding stuff. It's like I was jamming along to Live and Let Die last night. I was playing this G, and I slid up the C to next to C sharp, but kept all the open strings, and C to the D, same shape but to D, using the same open strings. I thought it rang out. It massively kind of rang out. I thought, I've never done that in 40 years. I thought, wow, this is really cool. So I played the same thing for an hour. I just played on the backing track and just played the same thing. I couldn't get enough of it. And so I think that iterative process is almost like a difference between a McDonald's meal and going to a restaurant in a way, because you're basically creating something which then you go, oh, I made a song, and then that's it. I made another song, that's it. And it's almost like you never go back to them and do anything with them again. Maybe you put them out on SoundCloud, and they also get scraped for data and those kind of stuff as well, which is ironic. That's almost like a backward negative feedback loop in terms of AI, isn't it? Scraping its own stuff. But it's almost that thing where you never go back to it again, where there's sometimes when you have recordings, you might go back, like I've done I've recorded everything I ever did from when I first started recording in the 1990, 88, 90, and 90. And I transferred it all I digitized it all as well. And you can see when I start off, I'm so bad. I've got some awful guitar tones. I've got some things where I think, oh my God, what did I really play that? And as the time goes on, you can see you getting better, and you get to a certain level, and you think, oh, that's pretty cool. And you get to certain things. So, but I don't know if you get that sense of achievement in what you've done, looking back at what you've done now. But with an AI, if everything's 100%, bam, you got this, and this. Is there a point? That's a discussion point, maybe, to say, is there a point where eventually you play with it a little bit and get bored because there's no, you're not being a kind of antagonistic towards yourself in the AI. You're not actually forcing yourself to play in a different way. You always keep, so you're going to keep plateau and you keep plateauing, and then do you get bored and drop off and never touch it again?
But then perhaps from the sort of devil's advocate kind of perspective, you could also say maybe it's a way of bypassing the 10,000 hours of misery and
That's part of the fun. That's part of the fun, isn't it?
I don't know. I remember having some really awful times trying to learn certain things. Playing guitar or with certain things with software, for example, and just struggling so much and just thinking I just want the answer, so I can move forward. And when you finally find out the secret, or you finally manage to get something under your fingers, or whatever it is, and it doesn't feel like you've achieved anything after a certain point. It just feels like, oh great, I've done it now. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I think also because this is still, as we said, it's a very new thing. It's only really in the last couple of years. I know it's been around obviously conceptually for a lot longer, but it's only really the last few years where this has even existed in the public sphere, let's say. And that means that we still don't know how this will go. I think educationally, like, there's a hell of a lot of things that will go on, especially in higher education now. As you know, there's a lot of potential there for basically for students to just cheat, or to just do the same thing. Just say, oh well, write me an essay about this, and they won't necessarily even check the references. They won't know where the knowledge has come from. They won't understand the knowledge itself and how to implement it again. But they need to just pass, so they pass, right? I think that there's a great opportunity now, whilst this is all still fresh and everybody's still exploring and understanding just how far this can go in many different directions, for there to be big discussions like we're having now about how to actually handle this, how to implement it into culture and society so that it's used in the best way it can be. This incredible technology that does all of this amazing stuff.
Because I think it's applied in the right way. It's like when I had a tour in Abbey Road and they were playing a copy of a version of Year Blues by the Beatles, and they chipped out all the extraneous sound to get to George Harrison in the back of the studio plinking a chord which wasn't even, you couldn't even hear in the mix. Also, it didn't even sound like part of the Year Blues. But you could also, in your head, you could shut your eyes and visualize him sat at the back on a stool going like that. And I think it's really, I think, incredible, So for those kind of things where you can clean up audio, as it's like with the last Beatles single, Now and Then, that taking John Lennon's voice and cleaning it up better than Free as a Bird is basically making it sit in the mix. Things like that are also really, really cool. Or automating, a compression chain or whatever it would do to, for production. Fantastic. And I think for production tools and speeding processes up and finding out exactly what is a key part of a track you're trying to repair or make better, or trying to emulate Van Halen's Brown sound, for example, those kind of things. It's fantastic for that. But I think, for me, the question about creativity and ownership is the big thing at the moment. Because obviously, in a stage where musicians' income has been eroded so much by poor streaming royalties and just getting screwed over generally in terms of trademarks and publishing and all this kind of stuff as well. What I'm finding now is that when you think about back in the day when albums were a big thing, people listened to the album in the 70s, 80s, even 90s, and people were still doing the very organic things. I mean, the last big band I really liked, Nine Inch Nails, and it's that kind of that amalgam between, really kind of intense heavy metal and vicious electronica and those kind of things. So they were still lasting because it works. And I think what you're finding now in music is that producing singles, which people only be hearing for maybe interested in the first 30 seconds, play on TikTok, for example, and they're playing it through now a mono speaker rather than a double speaker, or whether it's not even surround sound or anything like that. It's almost like the energy level has been lost from music, I think, in a lot of senses. Unless you're looking for a live band or, look at the Darkness, for example, and crazy kind of over the top kind of ridiculous kind of energy levels, but a lot of music seems to lack energy. And I know there's great music out there, but what we've been subjected to at the moment is just basically the same stuff, the same selling toaster type music, which is just again pushed out as product. That's all it is. So I think there's gonna be it's gonna be kind of an open playing ground for all artists. I think that's why it needs to change in that respect. And so you can use the tools to enhance what you're doing, but not replace it. I think that's where we are at the moment. I think this kind of music, getting back to my early point, is being taken over by developers. That's the problem at the moment. Developers who aren't creatives.
Yeah.
That's a drop the mic kind of statement there, I think,
Yeah.
We're going to break it a little bit. But yeah, I think it's like all of this is really, as I said before, I think it's just so new and so, I don't think anybody really realized that, sort of 2025 would be the year where all of this really is kind of kicking off, or 2024 again to now. So it's still just super tricky to even understand where this will go and to be able to have some kind of concrete opinion on it, because I think like personally my sort of view on this changes almost daily, because I see one thing where I think, oh, that's terrible, why would that be like that? But at the same time then there's something else where I'm like, oh, that makes absolute sense. But just thinking of this situation with TikTok now, for example, or Spotify, or any of this consumption methods that exist now, I think that it's more a case of they're already here, and they're the thing that people want now, or maybe not want, but
the drivers.
It's the medium, and it's not that you can go back and get people to listen to vinyl again in a big way. I know there was a resurgence of that, but not in the sort of sense of replacing everything and that being the main format, or saying go back to cassettes or whatever, whatever. And so I think there's also a question of like, how can we work with those mediums to make good things for them, rather than saying the medium is bad, the AI is bad. Like, how can all tools be used in a really like positive kind of creative way?
Yeah.
But I think
they also okay. Go on.
I was going to say, in a way, it's almost like, again, TikTok is a thing now, but it wasn't always a thing, and it may never be a thing in the future. So I think out of this kind of melting pot will come new idioms and new paradigms, I think. And the minute this is very frothy, there's going to be kickback from musicians and all this kind of stuff as well. But I think new's going to come out of it.
Yeah. You remember MySpace?
Oh, yeah, MySpace. Yeah. I was on that.
2004 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That was like everyone was on, and where people were sharing their music. You could have this little internal sort of player, right? And at the time, I remember that being the big thing, and then Facebook came, and it was like, oh, bye, And I think it's definitely going to be the same with TikTok. It will be the same with everything. There will always be this changing kind of preference, but I think that's cool. I like that there is that dynamism rather than being stuck in the one.
Totally,
that's cool.
Totally, because I think also, I mean, there's a boredom threshold as well, and I'm sure people get sick of Snapchat little ears or whatever and stuff like that at some point. Unless you're 5, there'll be a point where people get sick of that. Even TikTok, you might get sick of. Well, actually, I'm getting bored of 20-second, 30-second snippets of people dancing or jumping through hoops, or dogs jumping through flaming hoops, whatever. So, I think it will change depending on how. Obviously, you've got the market drivers in terms of what drives the market, but I think there's more awareness now that I think I said resurgence around younger people. I mean, everybody's younger than me anyway, but younger people now are coming in and thinking, well, actually, I want to play guitar now. I want to do something. I want to hold something. I want to play something. Actually be inspired, because all music. The great thing about now is that all music is now. So if you're 10 now, and you discover Jimi Hendrix, you're thinking, what the hell is this? Or you can discover Aphex Twin or whatever, you're thinking, what the hell is that? Everything is like, wow, you can find good bits, or Thelonious Monk and all this kind of stuff. It's all there if you look for it. And so I think that is a great place to be, because when I was a kid, you'd basically have word of mouth, whether a single came out or you heard an album. I mean, when I heard Rush, for example, 2112 album, my friend's older brother, basically, my friend basically nicked it off his older brother and lent me 2112. So I put it reverently on. I never heard Rush before. I put it on. I thought, oh my god, it's like, what the hell is this? And it's like I was hooked after that. I did no idea what was going on, but I got hooked. But now there's almost this thing where you can find things by total mistake, and you're thinking, wow, who Led Zeppelin? Who's this? Who's Robert Johnson?
Think about indeed. Like, what would you think about using AI as a way of being able to discover music?
Yeah,
because you can ask it, right? You can.
Yeah.
I know chat specifically, or any LLM. It's not like a specific music thing, but how you could say, I would like to listen to some music that has, like, I don't know, clarinet and guitar and tuba or something, and how it may be able to search the internet and find that for you and say, actually, the genre that you're looking for is like klezmer, I don't know, jazz, or whatever, whatever. But yeah, I think actually it has a really an interesting thing, because like I remember certainly when I was younger that it was hard to find music that was interesting to me. Like I was into like Nirvana, a lot of the things that were around in the early 2000s, like Korn and this kind of stuff, and Steve Vai. I liked a lot of electronic music from the 80s, and a lot of sort of scores from films, from sci-fi films, from the sort of 80s, 90s. But I couldn't always find what I wanted. And I wish that there would have been tools like that when I was younger, where you could just go and be like, I want to have something that sounds like this.
Yeah, exactly. Or immerse me in jazz. Tell me about jazz and what this is, and to get
Right.
and I think that would be fantastic, because basically when I think of, again, all my music I've picked up, it's just been by sometimes in a bargain bin in a record shop. You think, who's this? And you pick it out, you get it for 10p, and thinking it's something. And I bought records 50 pence before, and they've actually redefined my musical life, And
There's
the thing
nothing
is,
like it.
yeah, exactly.
Love it. Actually, there is one thing I will say about the thing of sort of using AI as a compositional tool or as a creative tool for producing music, is that you can't make mistakes with it in the same way yet. Because one of my sort of little goals whenever I have a new piece of gear is to find out not just how to use it, but also how to abuse it.
Yeah, totally.
And so I really do like plugging things into the wrong places or putting too much voltage or what. Like, I don't care if something breaks. It's not the end of my world. Right?
You got a soldering iron,
Exactly. So I love to sort of mess with things, or to especially when it's with digital chips in pedals, that kind of thing. They really don't like it when you start putting too much voltage in, and you get the most just weird sounds. Like I actually made with one pedal I can't remember exactly how I did it, but it was like I had an output from one of the channels on my mixer, which is an analog one from the 80s, an old Roland one, and I had the channel turned up full, and I don't think I noticed that it was on, plus sort of 12 or whatever. And so it was sending this signal that was also then going back into the effects loop, which was also turned up completely full. So that was boosted by like 24 dB or something, plus a loud signal hitting it in the first place, going into this pedal, and it was making digital multiphonics.
Yeah.
Which was
gnarly.
incredible. It wasn't making pitches, it was doing it itself. And it's like, oh, that's cool. And I like that. I think that the mistake, the finding through trial and error, basically, or poking things with sticks and seeing what happens. Big part of creativity.
That is an enormous part of creativity. Yeah. I think also when you're making guitars, back in the day, which I regret forever, I sent Gary Newman a tape, and basically I did it all on guitar. And I said, "Look, Gary, no synthesizers." And I put a picture of myself on the top of the letter. I thought, "Oh my god!" And ironically, he didn't remember me later on. I did a remix for one track, and it was down to the last two released. I sadly came second in that. He liked the remix so much, but I came second in the one that got released. But I thought, God, if he remembers me sending that taping. So I was playing like Our Friends Electric and Cars just on guitar with all these different multi-pots on a 4-track. So you can imagine how gnarly that sounded. And the thing is, I was always trying to make things which sounded like synthesizer, things I couldn't afford, and that's the part of the creativity, if you can bash around on a stick or I'll pluck a string on a tree, for example, like Howling Wolf did or Muddy Waters did when he'd have a guitar. Is that's part of the creativity. I think having it all laid on a plate means you've got nothing to aim for. I think that's part of the thing. It's just it's like having a banquet, isn't it?
It is, but the cost is a really good point actually. That is a massive like prohibitor for a lot of people. Because of course you have to pay a person to have lessons. This is expensive. You have to buy an instrument. That's expensive depending on what you buy. But even so, like it can be a lot of money, of course.
Yeah.
Maintenance. There's like a lot of things around it, and of course then you've got all the materials that you need to be able to learn more and keep going and playing, and it's a massive investment. I think
Yeah.
there's some meme that I saw a while ago.
I've got to go to the door. I'm gonna come back and gonna slice this and come back in the mouth.
Okay. We can pause.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh,
good.
Okay, we're back.
Yeah, so about creativity, AI tools, and generally learning curve as you are a musician and making these mistakes and allowing yourself to also somehow be lost in this process. I think this is the key of like being creative generally, to allow yourself to go through this process. And it's, of course, sometimes it's painful. But this is the thing that I think people generally are looking for. And in terms of like modern technologies and AI, but not only, generally speaking, like because there's a very big area of creating music through electronic devices and software, right? There is no live instrument needed even now to be creative, and this iteration in it. I'm not saying it's not relevant because I'm also a musician and I used to
I have to
learn.
throw in though, those things are still instruments.
Oh yeah,
because you're still
they are. Yeah,
it's a digital synthesizer. There is a certain interesting crossover there, because you think of like a lot of synthesizers basically from the sort of middle to late 80s and onwards have been fully digital. So it's only the only difference is that it's in a computer instead of in a box in front of you. It's the same thing. And yeah, I think sorry, because I have a bit of a like I don't want
a bit of a beef.
I think it's very important that there is this distinction is gotten rid of. Hearing those comments that used to be made in the media about oh well, it's not a real instrument. You can write a pop song by just pressing one key, or if you play guitar, you're somehow a better musician than Aphex Twin because he doesn't. It's nonsense.
No, it is nonsense,
and it's all that.
Yeah, because I think back when I was working as a kid, when I said I was really a guitar head, and there's some total metalhead and everything, and shredding everything. I hated synthesizers with a vengeance, and I thought there's no dynamics. Every time I touched synth, I thought, well, where is it? What's it doing? It was only when after the 80s, and about 88, 90 something, I got really into synths. I thought, oh, I was totally wrong. It's like you can create all these moods. You can create loads of moods with it. And now some of the synths I've got on my in my studio, things like Omnisphere, for example, or the Arturia Sound Factory as well. The Omnisphere particularly, the psychoacoustic sound synthesizer, it's evocative soundscapes. You can do. It's astounding. I mean, what you can do with it is astounding. And then we're putting guitar on top of that makes it more emotive, I think, in that respect. Synthesizer, and I also, like Alan, I got really annoyed about people saying, "Oh, you just press it." That's what I used to get when people used to say, "Oh, here's Mark, he plays electronica, like I just play like that this," and I got really annoyed because when I even play arpeggiation on a synth, in recording, I do one take. I don't do loops. I play it, so it actually works as one authentic take. And whatever glitches or kind of strange meanderings happen in that, it's all in time, but you get that feeling of feel around it rather than just a loop. And, for example, I could write a guitar track with, I just lay down a drum track and then bass, guitar, and I get a vocal on that. That's 20 minutes maybe. for a synthesizer track, it might take me to find the right sounds of everything pieced all together. It might take 4 or 5 hours, and
I
that's
always
so much more work, you know?
I always just think of the idea of if you take something like, one of the old like Jupiters, where it's not like a modular synth, but you still have all of the
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of filters and oscillators and all this stuff, and set it all to zero, and then give someone, full reign to just go and mess with it and see if they can make a pop track, by pressing
it's not
one.
gonna happen, is it?
Like, there's a
No,
lot of
it's
program.
not.
I mean,
It's a lot in there. Yeah, yeah,
things are not simple, and I think in a certain sense, like guitars, as much as they're wonderful and I love them a lot, they are basic things. It's a magnet, some wire,
yeah,
a wire, and a box
yeah.
with a speaker in it, right? And you just turn it up really loud, and it sounds
Oh,
sick.
11. Yeah, turn it to 11, and then
Hey, turn
yeah,
it up loud, it sounds sick. If it's got those little red hot things inside of it instead of the little black ones, it sounds
yeah,
better.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's visceral. That's what I like about guitar. It's visceral, and the more you turn it up, you feel this wave of air being pushed around you, and that's what you're playing for. It's a religious experience. I think that's what's missing in AI. I think at the moment it can be an interesting tool, but it's missing that visceral sense of creative rush. And I think also the other big thing is I think musicians like to push them through this pain barrier to try and get something they've never done before, and that's always the buzz, you know. It's like when I first learned guitar, I was listening to Gary Moore's Out in the Fields, and when I could play one note of that solo, I was going, wow, I can play one note. Well, I could play two notes, and I got to the point where eventually you could play the whole thing, and it was like going on a roller coaster. It was such a rush. That's what you're trying to aim for in music. This kind of this excitement, and that's what you want. You know, you want to hear a track and rush across the record store and just go and buy it, or when you're playing something, you want to feel it, and that's what AI is not. For me, is not really there, you know, in that sense.
Also,
So
people
I
who
think that's the
listen
thing.
to AI, I think it depends, because I've heard some, voices and opinions that even music created through this AI generative tools can be very appealing for also many people. It depends on I don't know, like what kind of music people like, and if you have more sophisticated taste, of course, it's nothing, not a big deal for you to listen to this, let's say, very how to say, like this music which is generated, right? But because I think this human factor is also very important. But on the other hand, lots of music, it's quite for example, in a one genre, it's quite similar, and it depends on, for example, the arrangement, on even lyric, or the other, like, many factors, right? Can make this music up, like that, it moves you or not. But on the other
Yeah,
hand, like, let's go back to the creative process, and like, because lots of the tools we have now, even for working with music or sound in DAWs, right? Like, even like noise reduction, right? Or some other functions that you can use this tool. You can literally click once, and
yeah,
like it works, right? While, like, some time ago, it was very, very hard and long process to achieve the same results as now. And even with creative process, we have already tools that can give you like results like here and now, even, right? But I think this is the question, and this is the key: how you use these tools. What do you want to do with these tools, right? And you can get some results very quickly, but then you can then process it, you can shape it, you can have fun with it, you can literally try to make something different, something yours. And this is like this loop in your process that you can use even generated sample or some idea or whatever, just as a sketch, for example, right? But I want to ask you, for example, if you had to explain your current work with AI, because you both work with AI tools, right? To a newcomer. So what example would you pick to show its creative potential?
That's a good question after all this.
Yeah.
I think for me, in terms of, say, for example, guitar playing, I've obviously created some algorithms to analyze dynamics in guitar playing, accuracy in guitar playing as well. So when you're trying to play a certain piece, the program can analyze what you're playing, how accurate you are, what level of intensity you're playing in it, what kind of tone you have, all those kind of things. And then from that point, then the tool, the AI tool, if you want to call it that, would actually then say, oh, try playing with a bit more dynamics in this area, try doing this. It's more kind of a mental advising you how to play something. So that's the area I work in that respect. So it's using tools to help develop skill. That's the thing, not replace it. The work needs to come from the person playing the instrument. It's not a free ride. That's my kind of take with this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Aled?
Yeah, so like mine, just to sort of come at it from a very different angle. I'm going to give two examples that could potentially be useful for people, I think, that maybe are not aware. I would say that these LLMs, Chat, Perplexity, Gemini, Claude, whatever you use, they are very good sounding boards for you to be able to bounce ideas off of and ask questions to. So if you're unaware of how to do something on a piece of software, for example, you can use it to help you do that. And of course, that works for music software as well. So if you're struggling with composing something, maybe think of it as like a sidekick that can, kind of answer some questions that you may have. So in that way, I think it's really, it's cool. Like I use it all the time. I use Chat most of the time. It can be very infuriating, but at the same time, it does come up with a lot of good answers when I'm not quite sure of how I want to get something to work, for example. Like I'm using Max MSP at the moment, and it's sometimes just unfathomable to figure out I need this to do this, and I need a cable to go here, and I need something to work in whatever way, and it's great for that reason. And what I would say, just from again a very sort of alt perspective, is from the compositional point of view. I actually use tonal transfer quite a lot because I find it really interesting. So this is taking like a sound, whatever sound you have. It could be your recorded voice, it could be a saxophone, it could be sound effects like a broken bottle or something, and then putting this through something like Noitone's FX plugin, which you can then sculpt on top of that sound with other sounds. So it's turning the broken bottle into, I'm trying to think what's in there. Stuff like there's something that's called like NASA voice or something, and it sounds like these space recordings from the 1960s with the bleeps and everything. It's really cool. So it's really useful for being able to like compose with it and sculpt sounds with it that normally, well, actually, as a thing just to come to the copyright on this, if I wanted to go and have an authentic NASA recording from the 1960s, I'm guessing that's probably still copyrighted. So I would have to go and clear that with someone before I can sample it. Whereas this, it sounds exactly the same. And if it's nonsensical, if it's just being used as a sound effect, as background noise or something, then it's totally legit to use it because it's not actually the thing. So it kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I think we can go to the end because maybe you have some conclusion, maybe in terms of ethics of using these AI tools. Maybe in this context you could just summarize the whole discussion and give some last thoughts about this topic and how do you predict where it goes in next few years?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's still very kind of an unknown kind of phenomenon in a sense. It could go in many different ways. I think it's going to be interesting in the next couple of years to see where it comes out and what happens with it, and how people take this on creativity wise. I think it's going to challenge a lot of people's preconceptions about music, and also generative music as well. But also, along as mainly people are still discussing it and trying to see if it can be used. If it can't be used in a certain sense, then it'll have to change and become a different paradigm. I think that's the thing. But I'm not against it. I'm still not. I think I'm slightly for it in certain areas, especially production. But creativity, it's got a long way to go before we get to any creative sense of an AI, or actually helping someone get better at their craft.
Thank you. And you, Alet, what do you think?
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think it's very much, it's in progress, right? We are all in progress with this thing, and it's really exciting. I think the whole idea of this opening up what frankly has become quite a stale industry, to some degree, especially in kind of mainstream music. I think this could potentially shift the direction in quite a nice way. And also, just sort of the Beatles, Mark, I think you mentioned them at least a couple of times there. Um, and yeah, I think if you think of how that was at the time when it was influencing a lot of young people to play guitar, or how Top Gun, I believe, was a big part of a lot of people signing up to be naval aviators in the 80s as well, in America. So this kind of thing where there's some cultural explosion that brings a lot of people into the cultural fold all of a sudden, that's never a bad thing. And I think, in my opinion, this will do that. I think a lot more people will be enthused to learn because it's easier to find the materials they need to do that. So who knows? Maybe there's going to be a whole new wave of new wave.
Let's see. Okay, thank you so much. That was a very inspiring meeting, especially
Thank
that
you.
I had prepared like lots of questions, but they weren't even needed because this whole discussion went into many directions, and I hope that many people can get inspired by this. Thank you.
Thank you.